Recording. So this is TikTok's most disturbing mystery, and by Nick Crowley. Right? It's his name, Nick Crowley. Nick Crowley. Yeah, 2 million subs. Oh. TikTok is a cesspool. The following video contains a account that may find us. Yeah, that was gross.
February 2022, an urban explorer makes his way down a long-forgotten dirt road somewhere in rural China. His ultimate destination was a dilapidated structure shrouded in mystery for both him and all others in the region, with many referring to it simply as a laboratory. But what kind of laboratory was completely unknown? This did little to deter the man. In fact, the mystique of this building made the location even more tantalizing, as it would make for the perfect setting for a video on his TikTok page, perhaps the one that would finally thrust him into the public eye. And as he walked down that old dirt road, he believed that each step was taking him closer and closer to uncovering that building's original purpose. But what he'd find in that old laboratory wouldn't be answers. In fact, he would be left with far more questions, as the video he would go on to post would lead.
I'll say this, as a white man, I don't think I would go there alone. But I would go. Yeah, why isn't it in 1080? What the frick? What the frick? Shouldn't, Encoding is overloading. I can't record. Okay. Let me check the record. Let me check the recording, see if it was out of sync or not. Go hard. Yeah. I just want to see if it was out of sync because of that same time. So, record. TikTok is a cesspool. The following video contains a account that may find us. Yeah, that was gross. Okay, it's not out of sync. You guys can hear me. My bad. My microphone should be a little bit lower, but it is what it is. Okay, let's go. Boom.
Leave hundreds of thousands of people horrified, disturbed, and in many cases, scarred for life. With the clip setting off what may very well be the darkest mystery to ever unfold on the site, and perhaps one of the most disturbing in the entire history of the internet. Before we fully get into things here, do you have any idea how many subscriptions you are currently
W ad. W paid ad. Let's go. Just skip. W. It's a W, but I don't want to see it because I'm not sponsored by them at all.
Cases I've covered in the world of internet oddities and mysteries, this one is probably the most unique, as the contents of this mystery involve videos that can barely be broadcast in any capacity, due to just how disturbing they are. And although I'm sure some of you will be disappointed that the videos themselves are not shown in their entirety,
I'm not.
I can assure you that these clips are ones that you don't want to see.
I don't.
And on that
I
note,
really don't.
Let's go back to that old dirt road. The location was one of many examined by this explorer who goes under the name Beanbag Adventures on Douyin, the original Chinese version of TikTok. And for the sake of this video, his real name will not be disclosed as he's never made it publicly available, so I'll just be referring to him as X. X's channel features a multitude of creepy locations left to the mercy of time and isolation, but of all the places he would go on to visit, he could tell immediately that this one was going to be different. As he entered the structure, he was greeted with an overwhelming stench that covered the building in its entirety. The mask he wore helped block out some of the smell, but not nearly enough to make it a pleasant experience. Noticing this, X immediately began to suspect that something was off, as he roamed the halls of the lab using the smell as a marker, following it to uncover its source. This led him past the first floor and down into the structure's basement, which consisted of old concrete rooms.
There's dead bodies.
Tunnels, almost like some sort of fallout shelter. And as he passed by one room in particular, he knew he had found the source of the stench, as the smell coming from its opening was nearly unbearable. But having come all this way, he decided to push on and enter the room, turning on his camera just a few minutes later to reveal what exactly he had discovered.
Come on, bros. Is he PewDiePie?
As he enters the room, X shows a large pool-like structure lined with old pieces of wood. And as it comes into frame, he prefaces the discovery by saying that the contents within this pool are merely props from an old movie. He then proceeds to point the camera down inside, revealing thick green water. And floating within this water were what looked to be children, mere babies, and dozens of them decaying in the water. X then begins to gather.
This is China, right? Are they all girls? You guys know that? You guys know that, right? Mm. Mm-hmm.
Bag and runs out of the room, shutting
Chose
off
the wrong
camera
video
right
to
before
watch.
getting sick.
I was gonna get something
The
else.
video is shocking, and as it made its way through the Douyin site, it was met with mixed reactions. Many took X's word to heart, believing his explanation that the children were simply abandoned props left over from some movie that must have been shot there, while others called it an outright hoax, believing that X's demeanor and the editing of the video came across as disingenuous, before going on to assume that the explorer had just set it up himself. But within this crowd were a select few who were more concerned. The bodies looked so real, and each one appeared to be in different stages of decomposition. And that smell, if they were simply made of plastic and rubber, then why was that smell so unbearable to the point that X had gotten physically sick from it? Following this line of
They will
thinking,
burn.
if somehow
If
this
there
were
was
to be
dolls and you
real,
burn
then that
plastic
begs the
and metal,
question,
burn,
what
you
were
know,
all
it
these
wouldn't be
bodies doing in
smelly.
an abandoned laboratory?
It's
Given what
with
seemed to be their
rat
level of
poop,
decomposition,
other animals
it was
poop.
clear that they hadn't been there for more than a few months.
But I don't
Yet
think
the
it is.
structure has been left abandoned for decades, and you can tell as much just by looking at the infrastructure. Due to this video having been posted in 2022, this automatically rules out the idea that this was part of China's one-child policy, as that was abolished back in 2015. Plus, that policy wouldn't have matched anyway, as some of the children seen in that water were, well, just that, children. None of them were infants, and some were even comparable in size to those as old as 5 or 6, which seems to immediately rule out this explanation.
Uh-oh.
Digging into the video a bit deeper, a few others began to notice what they believed to be an off-putting detail, as directly after X states that the bodies in the pool were simply props, he then goes on to say that this video was going to be censored, and that you'll only ever see this from him. This prompted the theory that the movie prop line was just some sort of cover-up to allow the footage to be shown across Douyin, so that he could expose the true horrors transpiring in this old lab.
Or maybe you could
Admittedly,
just
some of these details are a bit
monetize it.
bizarre, but despite all of this, the theory that these bodies were somehow real was merely speculation, and far-fetched speculation to say the least, as most would go on to assume the footage to be fake,
Did you call the
carrying on
cops?
with their lives and forgetting all about this bizarre video. And it wasn't just the viewers who seemed to immediately forget about this footage, as X himself would continue posting as usual immediately after this, making no mention of his discovery in that laboratory. And much like that laboratory, in the months that followed, X's video would soon be lost to time.
Didn't he
Or at
call the
least
cops?
this was the case until December 26th, 2022, when X would once again follow that old dirt road and return to the strange room.
He went back? He didn't.
兄弟们，防空洞里面那个实验室，一
Did he
池
say
子
the
小
N-word?
孩儿，一池子小孩
Wait,
儿，
wait. Did I heard the N-word?
Strange room.
兄弟们，防空洞里面那个实验
He
室，
did.
一池子小孩儿，一池子小孩儿。今天我又来看一看，
I'm just kidding,
拍
obviously.
上点视频，
I think.
胆儿小的勿
Yuck.
杂啊，记得注意细节。
This time, things within that tunnel were different. Upon entering, he would see strange bottles and tubes on the ground, which hadn't been there before, and as he approached the pool, he could now see children's clothing scattered all across the pathway, including a cap which would commonly be worn by a child. The pool itself was also slightly altered, as there was now a large blue tarp covering the majority of its surface, concealing its
What?
contents. However, at the far end was an opening, just large enough to reveal that those prop bodies
Sorry.
from before
What happened?
were in fact still in there. Only this time, the idea of them being movie props was far less believable. It had been 10 long months since X had first peered into that pool, and now the bodies he once claimed to be from a movie set were far more decayed, to the point that not just the bodies were shown, but the bones within them as well. Skulls, ribs, hips were all on display, being revealed by the peeling of their rotten flesh, in a scene that looked all too realistic. So much so
I'll say this, like, The I'll watch horror movies without with ease. I'll play horror games like it's nothing. But when there's something happening that involves hurting babies or kids, I do not like it. The only thing that I hate. I guess I got a soft spot for, I mean, which is normal, but it is what it is.
that X was now referring to them solely as dead bodies, as that level of detail would have been nearly impossible to fake. X then pulls out his phone and reveals the date and time, December 26th, 2022, 11:26 a.m., before turning to the exit and leaving in a hurry.
December 26th?
2022年12月26，兄弟们，这个味儿啊，我居然能挺住。不知道说点什么。哎呀，这里还有这些药瓶子，拜拜了，哥哥走了。我去，这个臭啊！哎，拜拜拜拜拜拜，你没的。
The second video was far different from the first, as its validity is much harder to argue against. I obviously won't be showing it here, but the bodies were just too realistic. I honestly don't think they could have been faked, as even across all the big budget movies I've ever seen, no dead body props have ever come close to this level of realism, which makes it seem all the more unlikely that someone could have faked this just for a TikTok. And that sentiment was shared across the site almost universally. Rather than being a source of speculation like that first video, people were now left simply horrified, having likely witnessed the sight of a dozen dead children. And this wasn't the only major difference between the two clips either, with the most relevant coming from the contents of the video themselves. For starters, those bottles, clothing, and that tarp were all not there upon his first visit, meaning that whatever this pool was being used for, it was still being actively visited and worked on after that first video was made. And worst of all, the number of bodies shown in that water was significantly higher the second time around, meaning that whatever he had walked in on was still clearly actively happening. Despite this disturbing detail, this didn't stop X from returning just a few days later, determined to reveal all of the horrors of that old lab. And upon this third visit, he would follow that tunnel even deeper, this time finding tubes with
I was
fetuses
thinking
in
about
them,
something else.
skulls, and even a
Listening,
full
but thinking about something else.
piled on top hundreds of other bones. He'd even uncover multiple large bags filled to the brim with even
Do
more
you
skeletal
think
remains. And what made this all the
this was a lab. It could have been like, I don't want to be like, like they were experimenting on kids or anything, but this could have been like a lab to try and figure out some of the diseases that cause kids to die, and their bodies were donated by the parents so that the scientists could check it out, see if they can find, because there's something, there's a couple diseases, there's a lot of things that could happen to kids and that we do not know about. I think there's something in here. It was called like sudden death or something. Like sometimes baby would just die, and people had no idea what's the reason. I don't know what it's actually called, so don't quote me on this. But I think it was the way he was called here. There was a lot of discussion about that, like maybe 15, 20 years ago. I remember saw it on the news, because like maybe sometimes just stop breathing or something and they die. So I wonder if this could be something like that, or it could be serial killer then, or Dr. Disrespect House alongside Nick Marks. Who knows?
More confusing was that all these bones were from what seemed to be fully grown humans, meaning that within this abandoned building were bodies ranging from newborns to children all the way to adults.
Oh, they were
According
adults.
to a few people across Reddit, X would make one more video in this laboratory,
Something
this
happened?
time focusing a search on the upper levels of the building, revealing more bones seemingly belonging to children, as well as kids' toys and masks.
还是实验室的化学用剂，这里还有不明的液体，这里还发现了小孩子的面具，小时候的回忆，一张面具，开心。这里还有一个皮箱，里边一只高跟鞋。这个应该是医院拍的片子，在走廊
Is it still a
东侧
mystery, or
发现了一个特别的格局。这个房间
did they know what happened already?
像是特别危险。
Where are the cops?
医院的1楼、2楼、3楼通通如也。
I personally couldn't fully verify if this location was the same or not, but it does appear similar enough to at least mention here. With that being said, we were left with 3 to 4 short videos, and so many questions, the most overarching of all being what the hell was happening in this laboratory. This question prompted numerous theories, one of the earliest being that a serial killer had been using this location to dump the many bodies of his victims. This would kind of make sense, as up until X had visited the building, it was virtually untouched for decades, making it the perfect place to commit heinous crimes far away from the public eye. But the main problem with this theory is the scale of it all. There were just too many bodies for it all to have been done by one person. Even a group of mass murderers would have a hard time amassing so many victims. And given the fact that most of these bodies seemed to belong to children, and the fact that they were disposed of in such a bizarre way, made many others begin to shift their beliefs towards other theories, with by far the most popular being that this location was being used as some sort of black market organ trade. This idea became a main focal point following the second video.
Black market organ trade on children? They don't have developed organs. Those organs would be worthless. Even I know about that. If you were talking about like actual people, like, because the black market probably would get like, I'm not saying it wouldn't be like something that it would been used, like hearts from children and shit like that in the black market. Like parents would be so, you know what I mean, that they would do, like they would get this because their kids are too far down on the list. I would see parents do it. They wouldn't even care about what happened. But if we're talking about money wise, we're talking about organs, that would be like adults, because their organs would be, it would be developed, it would be better. And that's just me that had no idea what this black market about that is. So
in particular, as many of the bodies shown had openings in their chest cavities, which revealed that they all seemed to lack any internal organs, prompting the belief that the kids were killed for their organs, perhaps in a medical facility somewhere else, and their bodies were dumped in this location afterwards, assuming that they would never be found. And in the minds of many, this wasn't just being done by some random group, and instead they believed it was being carried out by their country's own government.
China has no effective organ donation program. That's because culturally, Chinese people believe the body must stay intact even after death.
So they wouldn't do it.
The organ trade in China is quite the rabbit hole, but to make things simple, China has one of the lowest percentages of organ donors out of any major country. But despite this, it's somehow known as one of the easiest places to get an organ transplant, especially for wealthy individuals. People even travel there from other countries to get life-saving procedures, as transplants that could take years and years in the US can be done in China in the matter of weeks, as long as the money is right. Which begs the question, where do these organs come from? Well, in recent years,
Before we go to the explanation, because he might say it here, so I want to say this. Let's say someone wealthy goes there to grab an organ. Someone died in China, is an organ donor. I say there's a few people in China who do it. And by few, there were billions, so a few would be like 100 million people, not just a few. Let's say 100 million people. It'd still be a lot of organs for people to like. They don't allow, but if someone pays, someone that comes out from outside, they just go there, cut the recent victim, take out the organ. The guy comes or the girl changes, boom, sew it up, dress him up, goes back to the morgue. The family has no idea. Or the family needs money. They say yes, even though they don't. Like, oh yeah, this man will pay like $100,000. So, I mean, that's a lot. Or like $50,000, and the family says yes and shit, and they just sew it back up, hide it, and that's it. Maybe that's how they do it. But let's see. Explanation.
China has been caught executing prisoners that were not sentenced to death simply in order to use their organs in this trade, all because of the staggering amount of money that can be made per procedure.
Never
Though
mind.
This practice works for adults. There is one thing that these prisons don't have: children.
No
So when
way.
a child needs a new organ, let's say one of a high-ranking official or a wealthy member of Chinese society, where do they turn? This idea has prompted the belief that China has been doing some shady things to obtain these organs, like perhaps kidnapping and killing innocent children, simply to use their organs and save other wealthy children in order to gain a massive profit. Now I have to say that this is not a fully confirmed theory by any means, but it is a fairly common belief, even among members of China's own population. And because of this, X's 4 videos prompted outrage across social media, with many calling out the government for their involvement. And as soon as those fingers started to point, the case took a drastic turn.
Uh-oh.
On the morning of January 15th, the Beanbag Adventure channel would disappear from the Douyin site without explanation, which honestly comes as little surprise. X had shown his face all over these videos and was clearly not shy about exposing this lab, and with so many people now blaming the government, it was only a matter of time before he was silenced. In fact, X himself even foresaw this happening all the way back in that first clip. Unsurprisingly, when X's account went dark, many immediately began to fear the worst, believing that he was not only silenced on social media, but silenced altogether, likely being thrown in a prison somewhere or just killed outright. Because of this, X was hailed as a hero for risking his life to show the world what was truly happening there, and most believed that this would be the last time we would ever hear from X again. But as it turns out, something much stranger would happen from here. Just a few days after its removal, the Beanbag Adventure account would re-emerge, this time with all 4 of these videos missing. And even more bizarrely, he just continued uploading videos from there, going to different locations and making that same content he once did before stumbling across that lab. Despite the massive virality of the story, not once has he ever acknowledged any of his previous findings. And if you look at his page today, you would never know that just a few months before, he had the entire nation in an uproar. The whole situation is incredibly off-putting, and who knows what happened to X during that time his account went down. But whatever it was, it clearly frightened him enough to never speak of this abandoned building again. For many, this behavior confirmed their suspicion that the government was somehow involved in whatever the activity was happening within this structure. While for others, this confirmed that this was all somehow staged, as if it were.
I'll say this one time only. If the government did anything like that, let's say they did, would they leave all that behind like that? They don't have like a cleanup crew or stuff like this? I feel like everyone does. I mean, like them, like China, Russia, and Korea, North Korea, countries like that. They probably have like a cleanup crew, right? That will like maybe demolish the entire building. If the building belongs to the government, why not they demolish everything, clean everything, like there was no traces, no nothing, because so this wouldn't happen?
The chances of X being alive right now would seem to be rather unlikely. Plus, within all his exposés of this lab, he never actually revealed where it was, causing doubt in the minds of a select few. But if I'm being honest, I just don't believe that those bodies could have possibly been faked. Though due to the nature of cases like this in China, a true answer has never and likely will never be fully revealed, leaving us with nothing more than speculation and a mystery far darker than any we've ever delved into. I'll be monitoring this case for the next few months to see if anything changes or is revealed, as due to the high level of censorship, information was incredibly hard to find on this story, making it likely that not everything said here was entirely true, so I will be sure to update you all if anything ever comes of this. But until then, we'll be left with far too many questions, and nowhere near enough answers.
Done.